Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, there's been some requests to talk about the progress of the gardening type approaches, and today what I want to do is let's do a brief overview of some of the happenings, of course, and then some previews of coming attractions, and then we're actually going to talk about how to make an urban composting system that you can even use inside and it doesn't smell. And the hint is this is actually a worm farm. So you grow worms, you use that for your composting. Not only does it compost infinitely faster than a standard compost heap, but it does so without the smell. And so we're going to talk about that. But before we kind of get started, some of the other things since the last time we have been on here is that I actually have the solar platform built over here, although it's not really being used quite yet. We have mounted the aquaponics system, but we're not going to put anything in it probably for about another 2 or 3 weeks. But we actually have it mounted. We don't have it tested yet, but yeah, we'll get there eventually. We'll test it closer to the actual mount time. As far as the actual plants are going, I do have numerous things. I got right under me here. I got some lettuce coming up. Look at that. This is just a small one, just to kind of get some starter lettuce going, and then I actually have a bunch more started that's actually all going to go into the aquaponics. I do finally have a little thyme plant down here. That's just a thyme, so I finally have found thyme for it. Bad jokes. Ooh, I love the smell of thyme. And then as far as my other plants going, of course, my sage and basil is finally starting to grow. My Marium, I actually pulled a lot of things off it. I'm going to actually let this plant go to seed, and then we'll go from there. The one thing that I'm looking into right now is my peppers are not growing at all. All right, so there we have just a little bit about what we have going on. So, of course, the big guys over there are the tomatoes. They're already starting to go to flower. I did pluck off the first flower head on the first tomato plant, so that will hopefully get us moving there. Now you can see that in that white bucket there is a much smaller tomato plant. I'm not sure if that's either just not growing or if that's not a good bucket pot for it. It is about the size of the other ones that are growing and flowering. But what I think that is probably my late season variant. I have 2 variants of tomatoes and they got mixed up, so I'm not sure which one's which. So I'm guessing the big ones that are already flowering are the early harvest tomatoes, and those are probably the late harvest. And then, of course, down here, you can see we actually have basil, which is kind of in the smaller orange pot. That guy's actually starting to grow, so that'll turn into some nice basil seasoning. And then right next to that is the sweet Marium, which I'm letting that one go to seed. I've already harvested enough off of it for at least the next 6 months, so I'll probably start another one soon. And then, of course, sage right next to that. And then you can kind of see the big bean plant there. And the bean plant is actually already starting to grow some beans. Okay, so here's our bean plant. You can kind of start to see the beans already growing. So probably within about a week or so here, there's a big one there. So there's about a good 5 or 6 beans growing on that one plant there. And then this one there that's in the front now, that one's growing about 5 or 6 now as well. And then this guy on the other side. So there's a couple days worth of beans growing there. And then, so this pot I'm just going to all let kind of go to bean at this point in time. It'll eventually die off there, and then this pot's going to be replaced with another set of beans that are already started. And, of course, some of it's going to go into the aquaponics system. Okay, so over here you can kind of see where the aquaponics is at. We just kind of mounted that to the side of the fence rather than having to build its own system. And the other one that's not working well is there's one of them that's closest to the plants. It's actually kind of mounted to the fence differently. We're going to have to do something different with that one. But what you won't be able to see right now is there's actually a bin, which is just to the other side of that big solar panel. And right behind that is a bin where we're going to have some fish that are going to be swimming around down there. And those are actually what's going to be feeding the nutrients in the aquaponics. So we don't use any chemical fertilizers. We're all just using the just whatever the fish waste. So the first time we ran the aquaponics, we actually it worked, but it didn't have enough nutrients going through it, and it's just we had way too few fish. So we're going to have at least 20 or 30 goldfish in that bin at least. which is going to take trips to the store every week to replenish the goldfish. We're just using 25-cent feeder fish because they eventually will, they're feeder fish, they die easily. At the end of the season, whatever's left, I'll actually just take down to the farmers where I pick up my milk at the farm. He's got a big pond there, and I just release the goldfish into his pond at the end of the year. So, no fish are intentionally dying outside of the, what just generally tends to happen. Now, we'll talk more about the solar system later. So this guy here is running on a 100-watt solar panel. And this is, there's a 75 amp hour battery in there. We have a charge controller and a modified sine wave inverter. We're thinking the modified sine wave inverter it might put too much stress on our motor, just because a standard type AC pump, you wouldn't want to run off a modified. But I have 2 pumps, and it's infinitely cheaper to replace the pumps than it is to buy a pure sine wave inverter. And everything else I need around here, actually modified, is going to be just fine. So we just decided to save the money for now on that. And we'll do a video specifically detailing how that works and how all that's put together at a later date. But now let's actually talk about the worm farm. Okay, so this bin system is the worm farm. This one's actually about 2 feet high or so, maybe 18 inches, 2 feet high. You can actually make a short one. The first time I made one of these, it was just with like 6-inch high bins. You need at least 2 bins. I have 3. And the reason I have 3, I'll kind of detail why. So basically what this is I have 2 identical bins, and then the last one's just a little bit deeper. I went with this system just because I already had these 2 bins. They were empty, and so, hey, just use those. And then I bought one more bin as my bottom stager. So inside of here is actually just all the basic food waste. I'm not going to show you that because it's a little vomitous. Basically, I just keep a little plastic coffee can on the counter, and any type of food waste goes right into there. And then that just gets dumped right in here. In fact, I think I will show it to you because, it's gardening. Ooh, so you can see what that looks like. Yummies. Banana peels, corn husks, eggshells, and other random odds and ends. Now, what we have here is we actually have 2 of these stacked up. And these 2 bins are actually identical, the 2 black ones. They have holes on the bottom, and then you drill a series of holes up top. Of course, this guy here is cracked. That's one of the reasons why I use these ones. It cracked a long time ago, and it doesn't matter if it's cracked or not. So what we would have in here is you actually get some worms. So there's a place, I'll have a link in the description, and that is Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, which is here in Pennsylvania. They are a good, at least national, I'm not sure about international, but at least a very good national place to buy worms. What they'll sell is they'll sell boxes of red worms. And so I started with 250 red worms in here. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to take this compost and they're going to turn this into regular raw soil. So if I lift this bin up here, there will probably be some worms down there at the bottom. Yeah, you can kind of see them a little bit there. If you come down here, make sure you guys can see that. You can see there, this is a giant bin full of worms. All of this started looking like that compost, and now it is basically pure soil. Of course, some of the worms are trying to escape. They're like, bright light, run away. But you'll see that everything is now, basically what they're going to do is they're going to start turning into this. And then with the holes on the bottom, since they're pretty much out of food down there, is they're going to start migrating their way up. So as they migrate their way up through the holes, eventually the worms will leave the bottom part, leave me with just regular soil, and then they'll start eating the top. Or what I'll end up doing here eventually is I'll just scoop about half of that, and I'll just throw it at the top, and then it's just going to make the worms sit around up here in the top. All right. Now, as far as what's the bottom bin for? Well, the bottom bin is moisture will build up here, or occasionally I'll just pour some water in here from rainwater or whatever's left after watering the things. And then what happens is the bottom bin actually formulates what is then called worm juice. And so if I lift this guy up here, and let's set this guy to the side a little bit, you'll see we are now left with just a bunch of liquid. This here is actually mostly like worm waste. There might be a few dead worms down there, which I think I see some. And all this is what's trickled down through here. So this is like a super organic fertilizer that's made without actually any chemicals or anything. And so what you do with that is about, maybe every other week or so, I'm going to empty this into my watering bucket, top it off with enough water, and use that, and that will give me a very nice organic fertilizer for all the plants that are in the pots. And so that's that. Now, most people, when you make a worm bin, actually drill a spout into the bottom of the bottom bin there, just to easily pour that off. I don't find that that's worth the extra time or hassle to put together, because I just find pulling these guys out, pouring it into the bucket once every other week is sufficiently enough. So that's kind of how to get an organic worm farm going. Again, these do not stink, so you can actually make these in an apartment, in an urban setting. This is the best way to do composting in an urban setting, because it takes a lot less time. It produces very good organic soil, and when it does so, it doesn't have any smell at all. So I actually had one of these in my office for quite a long time, because I found that the office was the best place for it. And you didn't even know it was there if you never opened it up to see what it is. So that's actually one of the best ways to do some natural composting of your home kitchen scraps. Throw some worms in there. The worms I think are going to cost you maybe 20 bucks. And then you shouldn't actually have to buy them again for a small scale thing. They will self-regulate their population, and they will double their population about every 90 days. So you'll start with 250 like I start here. I probably have about 400 or 500 worms in here now, but they won't actually overpopulate themselves. They are going to keep themselves just to that degree that they need to be. They won't overproduce, so they'll die. They won't underproduce. They'll just kind of stay right where you need them. So hopefully that's kind of gets you started. I think the next time we do one of these, maybe in a couple weeks, we'll highlight what we did to build the solar chamber. And then by that time out, so a month or so out, hopefully we should have the aquaponics running here as well. So let me know your basic thoughts in the comments down below.